When I examine female bodies as part of the annual exam, in addition to the pelvic exam, I examine other major organs, including the lungs. We all have had a clinician place the cold stethoscope on our chest and back for this part of the exam. We experience this even as a young child. I do this very intentionally, not only to document lung health, but to get my patients to take deep breaths consciously, to slow themselves down. After all my years of practice, when I enter in a room, I can almost know a patient's respiratory rate even before the examination. So many of us are panting our way through life, daily grinds of being a working person, some of us taking care of families, communities, living with daily stressors and stress that change the way we breathe. So again, back in the exam room, after I'm done listening to the person's lungs, taking the stethoscope from their back, the patient will often laugh and then say, quote, "I'm just going to take a few more deep breaths. It feels so good." Welcome to Gynocurious. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Novatt. We are here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please don't forget to leave comments and give us 5 stars in whatever app you listen. And if you have any questions or comments or want Gynocurious to discuss a topic I haven't yet addressed, please let us know at comments@radiofreerhinecliffe.org or gynocurious@gmail.com. Today, I want to welcome Elettra Wiedemann. She is had varied professional experiences in fashion, food, and sustainability and entrepreneurialism. And more recently, she brings together talented artists and educators to create terrific programs at Mama Farm in Long Island, New York. She is a dedicated yoga practitioner with a daily practice in meditation and brings these practices along with breathwork to participants at Mama Farm and beyond. Welcome, Elettra.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. So I guess I want to start with your arc, fashion for 12 years, a master's of science from the London School of Economics and Biomedicine, focusing on global food policy and food technology, an entrepreneur and a cookbook author, and now at Mama Farm programming their events. It kind of feels, pardon me, like you've gone from the outer world and outer self to the inner self along your journey. Can you speak about this arc?
Yes, totally by accident, by the way. In fact, I'm 41 now, so now I feel like I have kind of a bit of a perspective to look backwards and say like, oh, all of those dots led to this in this way. But while I was living all of those things, I felt very scattered and I felt very insecure and I felt like a loser, frankly, because I couldn't quite find my thread and I couldn't quite find what was really making my soul sing. But yes, I worked in fashion as a model for many years. I enjoyed that to the extent that I was like traveling the world and working with really cool people and making a lot of money for somebody of that age and feeling very independent. And then there were things about the fashion industry that I found a bit more difficult to connect to, but I certainly learned a lot from that industry. I grew up as a tomboy, t-shirt and leggings, really Betsy Johnson leggings, because I was an 80s child, kind of girl. And so the fashion industry really taught me that there's really only one chance to make a first impression and how important that is and the importance of kind of curation, visual elegance and being attention grabbing in a way that was very tasteful and subtle and not necessarily always very loud. So I really loved those lessons. And then I needed them. I needed to grow in that way. And then I went to the London School of Economics and ended up studying global food policy and food tech. And that at the same time, I was racing and triathlons because I love my dad and I want to be just like him when I grow up. So he was doing that. So I was doing that to get closer to him. And I got very into my diet and dialing in my diet to be a better racer. And once I learned the power of food, I kind of got stuck into a wormhole. And so I studied that for a long time in food policy and then various entrepreneurial things, which we can talk about later if we want. But ultimately, those two spheres kind of came together when I moved out here to Long Island. And my mom asked me to help with the farm that she had started, which at the time had no name, which was just called The Farm. And that was when all of these different lessons started kind of coming in and giving me a perspective that I think was maybe unique, that helped us create Mama Farm, what is now known to the world as Mama Farm, and to find our, find our niche and create programs that speak to our community in such a way that is supportive and nourishing, and most importantly, or not most importantly, but I would say equally importantly, does not detract or compete with the other farms in the community.
Mm.
That was something that was really important to us. We feel like the pie is big enough for everybody, and we wanted to be really conscious about how we did things, and I think we've managed to do that.
Yeah, thank you. It's so interesting how often I speak to guests who express kind of this insecurity of the zigzagging of our professional arcs, our
Mhm.
work lives, and how often that zigzagging is exactly what we need to do. And in my profession, so many people go just straight. They go from college to medical school to practice, and they're often quite unhappy because they've lived in this very insular world and missed out on a lot. So I'm really convinced that the zigzagging, the insecurities that come with that are actually the building blocks for a tremendously rich life and a way of accumulating information, not only about yourself, but about the outer world in a way that's so, so important to being kind of great at what you do, or at least curious about what you do. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. I can't remember who it was, but I remember I was in the throes of my kind of like, who am I and what am I? And I have no purpose and I can't focus. And when somebody said to me, you're good at a lot of things and you're finding out what you're good at. And they used Yo-Yo Ma as an example to me. They were like, somebody like Yo-Yo Ma is born with this very clear kind of mission, soul mission on this planet. And
Right.
that is what they are doing from the time they're a child to the time they die. And maybe that looks glorious to you on the outside, but I think within, somebody like that might feel just what you said, kind of like, what did I miss out on? Could I have done something else? So grass is always greener. Life is funny.
Indeed, it is funny. And thinking about Yo-Yo Ma, look at what he's doing now. He's traveling the world and teaching and exploring music in a wide array of venues and kind of breaking away from the classical arena. So it's, yeah, we all kind of, well, we look for ourselves in a lot of places. And if one is burdened with the choices, like you, having all of those capacities, yeah, that can be confusing and challenging. But of course, it's such a gift.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is. So now
Yeah.
I feel grateful, and in my 20s, I felt confused, but I think confused in their 20s.
Indeed, indeed. So I want to talk just a little bit about my biomedicine. You mentioned how it kind of informed you about food. How does it continue to inform you about food and what happens at Mama Farm around food and preparation of it?
Oh gosh. And the London School of Economics was such a wonderful school and education for me. It was more of the British system, which is literally like, here are 700 pages to read and I'll see you on Monday. American schools are a little more like, let's go talk about it and like, let's make sure you understand. And so for me to adjust to that was a little difficult, but the thing that was both heartbreaking and hopeful in what I learned from the London School of Economics is like, there's no big conspiracy. Like
Mm,
like the world is really complicated and people are usually making perfectly rational decisions within a certain parameter of what they have available to them in that moment. And then we all, not all of us, but everybody in the West, I would say, or in America, lives within this capitalist system. And, there are certain things that people have to do to survive. And so the London School of Economics and my biomedical degree and the food policy stuff that I studied really helped me to not demonize
mm,
some things that I think I had pretty high ideals about. And I remember as I was leaving the London School of Economics, it felt I saw that there are some people who really stay in the ivory tower, so to speak, and just kind of point their finger and say this is bad and it should be like this. But have they ever farmed a day in their lives? No. Have they ever, run a food market? Absolutely not. And I remember I was at a food conference in Brooklyn and it was about the food system. And it was full of people. It was full of food entrepreneurs and businesses and journalists. And I swear to God, there was not a single farmer in the room in the whole
Wow.
conference. And so I think that has really humbled me, and it's given me a lot of compassion and empathy for humanity. It's really given us a foundation at Mama Farm from which we operate, which is to say, we're a regenerative farm. Our mission is in biodiversity and conservation, but it's not against anything. It's just what we do, and it's something that we educate about. And there are perfectly reasonable reasons that the food system is the way it is. Can it be reformed? Yes. Are there conversations that need to be had? Yes. But we're certainly not going to get anywhere by pointing our finger at people and demonizing and blaming. So I think that was sobering to come out. The first year of the London School of Economics was kind of the melting away of all my ideals. And feeling quite lost and unmoored. And then in the second year, it was kind of coming into a space of learning how to really look at something down to the micro decisions and understand them from a human perspective. And I've brought that into Mama Farm, I think, with the help of my mother, who's an incredibly generous-hearted human being.
Hmm. I have to mention to the listeners that this is November 14th, 2024. And I kind of feel like you've just shared with us a way of coping and looking at the world given the results of the US election.
Yeah.
And I like it. It's helpful to me because I can be quick to I guess pointing fingers, feeling like there's a conspiracy, thinking, oh, nobody's thinking about these things and why are they not? And can get pretty negative at points in our political, social world arenas. But I think you're right. I know you're right that the generosity of, well, kindness goes a long way. And the generosity of knowing this is my approach. I'm not going to impose it on others. And I'm also not going to suggest that the way others are doing it is wrong per se. So thank you. I think that it kind of feels like a perfect segue into kind of the meat of our conversation today, which is about breath and the expansiveness of breathing and breathing deep and your practice. So I just wanted to kind of remind people that, all of us living creatures breathe in this kind of it's an automatic kind of part of living, kind of a rather unconscious part of our daily lives, and certainly something that many of us take for granted. Until you see someone out of breath, do you really begin to think of this part of one's existence? I guess unless you're a person like a free diver or a singer or a yogi, for example. These are folks who build a very different relationship with their breath. Can you comment on that?
Just the importance of the breath and yeah.
Well, how kind of separated we are from our breathing in so many ways. And yet there are these people in our world who so clearly, including you, where breath becomes the metronome, if you will, of their daily life.
I mean, I think how I'll answer that question is to kind of go back a step to what you just said about the election. And I wanted to offer to your listeners and to you that the word radical comes from a Latin word radix, and that means grounded.
Hmm.
So to be radical in today's world, especially, I would offer, is to be grounded. And
I love that.
so
Thank you.
a lot of the focus of what we're doing at Mama Farm right now in the breath work and in the meditations is to kind of get people in touch with a space that exists for every single person and every single creature on this planet, living creature, which is a space that is prior to concept. We've all become very mental. We're trained to do this from the day we start talking. To a certain extent, we need language and concepts to kind of communicate with each other and form ideas, and of course, but there's also a richness and a different layer of experience, which includes the breath, right? You can conceptualize your breath. I could ask you to close your eyes and watch it or feel it, but there's still something happening and by itself and before you're even noticing it, whether you're noticing it or not. And that is your breath that you're taking in or out right now is connected to the whole universe. It really is. It wouldn't exist without phytoplankton in the sea, microbes in the soil, trees. Those things wouldn't exist without sun. Those things wouldn't exist without rain. Those things wouldn't exist without the forces of gravity spinning the planet around right now. So to really feel your breath and really for a moment just kind of reflect upon how it is there and what is happening and what's creating it is very powerful. And I would just offer to your listeners that, again, this is a very chaotic time. I certainly have no answers. It's very hard to understand what's true and what's not true. It's very hard to not have a lot of opinions about everything, but there is a space before all of that. And I think that it's important to, and the most radical act we can do right now, because I just think things are going to get more and more crazy with AI, and we have to remember how to connect into the things prior to concept. And so that for me is the power of the breath. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And well, it's your answer. And I love that. So thank you. I think that there, again, there is no right or wrong. It's just how you kind of come into it. I mean, I know there are listeners out there who are wondering, why is Amy talking to Elettra about breath? And for me, breath is a form of medicine. Again, during the exams that I do, I'm not just thinking about the physiological changes or exchanges of oxygen and carbon dioxide, but the kind of vitality and function of the lungs, the health of the bronchioles and the bronchus, not only how one breathes, but the quality of one's breath. And so what you've tapped into is, I'm going to use a word and you can correct me if I'm wrong. For me, it's medicine. For you, what I'm hearing you describe is spirit, is intersectionality, is again the connectivity of all creatures, all living beings, all aspects of our lives. And part of what I'm trying to do on Gynocurious is take it out of just the exam room. That our pap, I always say, you don't go to a gynecologist just to have your pap smear. A monkey could do a pap smear.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that your experience with any clinician is much richer and dives deeper. It's not happening a lot in our 15-minute visits these days, but yeah, addressing kind of the global nature of all this is so important. So how did you get into this? Where along your path did you discover meditation and breathing? It's that I don't think they taught it at the London School of Economics, did they?
Oh, they didn't. So again, come into your life in a funny way. So when I was a child, I had a back brace. I got diagnosed with scoliosis when I was 12. On the first day of my first period, by the way, it was the first day I had to wear my back.
Oh, what a day.
I was like a really bad day. It wasn't my best. It wasn't my best day. And so I had this back brace, which went from my chin and covered my pelvis. I was a steel rod in the front and 2 steel rods in the back. So I was really quite immobilized, and my muscles and my whole back basically started to completely atrophy. At one point in my life, if I put my head back, I couldn't pull it back up without pulling it up with my hands,
Wow.
like
Yeah.
something out of a movie.
Yeah.
It really atrophied. And at that time in the world, Madonna's Ray of Light album had come out, and that was her album where she was diving into kind of Eastern aesthetic and, dance and sound. And I was like blown away by the Ray of Light album as a young teenager. And so my entree into yoga was through Madonna's Ray of Light video. I was like,
I love it.
I was like, I want to be like Madonna and look like her, and her body looks amazing. And like, I need some of that. So I started going to yoga because of Madonna. And then once I started going to yoga, it helped my back so much. It helped me to condition and align my spine and my muscles in such an incredible way. And so from there, then I started going to more yoga classes all over New York City. And then I found Jivamukti Yoga, which was, a famous yoga studio for many years and still is. And they were much more focused on the philosophy and chanting aspect and meditation. And I did that to a degree when I was in my teens. I can't say I really fully understood it, but I think that the seeds were planted around that time of my life. And then in my 20s, I had a lot going on. I was modeling full time and in school full time and traveling a lot. And so I got very anxious and also feeling lost and like a loser and all that stuff. So I was kind of piling on to myself. And then those seeds of meditation started sprouting in order for me to kind of get a grasp on my own anxiety and watch my mind and be mindful. And then the practice has evolved from there into, completely new things and teachers and paths. And then I got into breath work, and then that's kind of how that all came to pass. But it was completely by accident, and I'm very happy. I've learned incredible things and feel connected in a way that I never would have expected as a younger person. So it's all been a great gift.
I think Madonna would probably value your fandom more than many others. That's so great. It's great. Great. She is quite inspiring, I'll tell you. Whew.
Crazy person, but in the best possible way. So.
Yeah. Well, as we learn as adults, sometimes you just got to break out because it's the only way to break free and to explore new things. So I was reading about breath meditation, and I practice meditation, and breath has always been more about how it interfaces with my mantra. But when I was looking up kind of breath meditation, there are so many different techniques.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand kind of where one would begin with this concept and how you practice it? Is it one approach? Is it many? How does that go?
So I think that there are so many different kinds of meditations and so many different kinds of breath work and so many kinds of everything in the world, because different things work for different people, and different people have learned from a teacher along the way and then changed the practice a little bit, and then so on and so forth for thousands and thousands of years. So I would say, like I said, I was going to yoga and I did a lot of breath work in these classes, and I would be doing it and I would be like, what is this? I'm bored. I'm not getting out of this. I feel dizzy. And other people, meanwhile, are telling me that breathwork's changed their life. And I'm like, I think you're all insane. So it never really worked for me. And then I would say 3 summers ago now, we had an event at Mama Farm, and I had just had my second child, Vigo. And Vigo was the sweetest baby, but he was so chubby. I mean, I can't believe that I gave birth to this baby naturally. He took all my chi. He was just, he was just this incredibly sweet, chubby child who just wanted to breastfeed all the time. And it was a very physically exhausting, heart fulfilling, but physically exhausting experience. And we had this event at Mama Farm run by this woman named JJ Martin, who's a fashion lady. And JJ is a very spiritual person, seeker. And she said, I really want to offer the people who are coming to my lunch breath work. Elettra, can I put you on the invitation as the host? And I was like, oh yeah, fine, great, breath work, fun, yeah, great, whatever. I'm happy to host. Thank you for doing this event at Mama Farm. And then, of course, later realized that meant that I actually had to go do the breath work at the event. So I went with my boobs leaking and feeling like I really didn't want to be there, and kind of feeling like I've done breath work. It does nothing for me. And then she had this wonderful woman named Allison Sinatra who hosted the breathwork session. And I don't know so Allison explained this particular pattern of breath, and I did it begrudgingly. And I got to tell you that I was doing it, and something happened during that breathwork session. And I got up from it and felt a little strange and thought, oh, well, that was really strange. And then I immediately wrote it off and thought to myself, oh, well, I'm hormonal and I'm postpartum and I'm stressed, and maybe I fell asleep and had a lucid dream, and I just kind of batted it away. And then fast forward, I would say 6 to 9 months later, I was going through a really hard time in my life, and I was meditating and yogaing and therapying, and I was really trying to kind of throw all my tools at this time in my life, which was really just calling me to grow. And I kind of understood conceptually how I needed to grow, but like when it came to actually like applying those lessons in my life in an embodied way, like there was a disconnect. And I was getting really sad and depressed and frustrated and anxious again. And so as a Hail Mary, I got in touch with Allison, this breathwork lady, and I was like, I don't know what you do or what's going on, but can I try some sessions with you and see if it moved the needle? And I did. And like I did breathwork with her for a while. I can't even remember how long, maybe a year and a half consistently. And it like opened up my life in such
Wow.
a powerful way. And I was really blown away, not only by the practice, but by Allison, who frankly is this incredible woman and facilitator. And then I became very passionate about it, and I ended up going through the training program that Allison went through by accident. Like I didn't realize I was signing up for the same thing, but it turned out later that it was. And now I offer it at Mama Farm and to people who want to do it in my community. And everybody says that same thing. I don't know why I'm here. I'm a little, I don't think this is going to work. And by the end of the session, they're like, what just happened to me? What is this? When can I do more? So it's a very mysterious and powerful thing. And I know you've done it too. So maybe you could speak to a little bit of your experience, but I don't fully have a scientific, conceptual explanation for why it works the way it does. It does really connect you with something a little deeper that I think is separate from a different plane of existence, a different dimension that we all kind of have within us and maybe don't really fully have access to unless we use certain practices.
Well, we know that meditation alone has physiological effects. I
Yeah.
mean, we know it lowers blood pressure and heart rate, it improves sleep, immunity, it resets stress so that one can respond to stress more easily, reducing stress hormones, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is all measured and seen with meditation alone. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what the physiologic slash spiritual slash cosmic slash individual journey that happens. But yeah, I had one experience with you, and it was I'm going to use this word very purposefully because it was so profound. It was almost psychedelic.
Yeah.
And I've heard other people subsequently, when I've had exchanges about my experience with you at Mama Farm, use that same word.
Mhm.
And so, you know, what psychedelics do is literally change brain chemistry and neurons and neurology. So there's something that happens. So let's just break it down a little bit for our listeners, for someone who has no idea what we're talking about. So, you're in a room, you have people with you, and how do you have this class kind of in a brief sort of way? What might it look like?
So the breath work takes place completely lying down. So in a class of people will show up. I'll give my little spiel about the who, what, where, and why of the breath, explaining what the practice is. And then people lie down and they do the breathwork practice for 30 minutes of active breath, which is this very specific breath pattern that I can go over if you'd like. I like to explain to people that there's kind of 3 phases of the breath, and these phases kind of come in and out. It's not necessarily sequential, but like the first 12 minutes or 8 minutes of doing it, it's called the I hate Elettra phase, or like the this lady is crazy phase. Like you're doing it and nothing is happening and you're just like hyperventilating, quote unquote, in the corner, and you're just like, what is happening? And then all of a sudden, as the oxygen flow in your body starts to change and the CO2 and O2 levels in your body start to shift, something starts to happen. And that can start in the sense of feeling a little disembodied, tingling in the feet and the hands, a certain feeling of dizziness. And I am like really on people for the first 15, 20 minutes of the class, like coaching them, like breathe harder, breathe more, offering prompts. There's music happening, beautiful like meditation music, you could say. So there's an atmosphere happening around you. And then the third phase of the breath work is really kind of this release phase, or this kind of clarification phase where people start crying, or some people start laughing, or some people start laughing and crying, or some people have this kind of like very simple realization of like, oh, I am this, like I am feeling this. And, it's beyond, again, it's like beyond mentalization. It becomes from like this deeper place. And then there's kind of this the breath just kind of helps your body and your system to like process these things a bit. The first time that I did the breath work with Allison, she told me breath work is like a house cleaning. You're literally opening up everything inside your body, all those secret little corners, and you're kicking up dust and you're taking stuff out and you're decluttering, and the breath is helping you to do all of that. So that can look have in a plethora of ways, but ultimately people come out of the breath work, I think, feeling much more grounded and much more clear. Something that really became clear to me, for example, was like I was carrying around so much unconscious baggage that was so not necessary anymore, fully reasonable to be there at certain times of my life, did not need it anymore. And the breath work helped me to kind of really see it. I mean, it was fully unconscious in my case, really see it, learn to have compassion for it. And in creating kind of an open space for those feelings to exist and stop resisting them unconsciously, they kind of dissipated. And so I was able to grow. I was able to move out of this kind of automatic reactivity into all new kinds of reactivity. I'm not saying that I'm like this Zen Buddhist, but there was a process. And I really feel like since the breath work divides my life into like kind of an A-B, like I really feel like since I started the breath work in my life, there has been so much more growth and depth. And that's not to say that I'm Buddha or anything by any means. It just means that I feel like I'm much more connected to myself than I had ever been before. And there's a lot of peace that comes with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I sometimes find myself sounding a little bit, I don't know, quaint maybe, in that I remind my listeners that the mind and the body are connected. And I say it over and over again, partially in response to my training, which was so disconnecting of the two. Allopathic medicine for long, long time never really honored the connectivity. And it's only now that my colleagues are willing to say, "Oh yeah, the way I'm feeling affects my body, and the way my body feels affects my mind and my emotional plane." But yet still there's a resistance, because until you can demonstrate it on a cellular
Spreadsheet.
level, exactly, or with
Yeah.
the scientific method, there's this resistance. But I don't know anyone, whether they're an allopath or a homeopath or a naturopath or a builder or whatever one does in their life, who doesn't have that experience of how I'm feeling affects my body, and my body affects how I'm feeling and experiencing emotion. And so you just described this wonderful process by which, your emotional experience, the contours that had been unconscious, and for some, all of us, we have unconscious landscapes, whew,
Yeah.
that get unraveled or sometimes don't, but then affect the way we feel and our overall health. And that's part of what we want to share with the audience today is we're talking about healing. We're talking about ways of unwrapping, excavating stuff that's going on, not on just a cellular level, but on again, a spiritual level, and in ways that we don't even completely understand.
Mhm.
So I think that's what the breath work for me feels so kind of a tangible way of that journey, of that excavation, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if anybody's listening to this right now and saying like, "Oh, this sounds hooey," I would just offer like, we are all human beings living in the world, and we've all had experiences where you walk into a room and everything looks okay, but your gut is like, mm-mm. Or you meet a person and they're smiling and sweet and look cool, and you're shaking their hand, and there's like a zap into your heart that's like, mm-mm. And I think that, you know, there are ways of experiencing the world that are just as real as the kind of cerebral existence, which is it is very real. We all process the world mostly through our minds, but there's this other plane of existence, which is literally from the neck down, that you exist in the world and trauma hits you. I remember going through some traumatic things and literally feeling like something punched me in the stomach.
Mm.
That energy gets kind of locked in there. And then your brain comes in and is like, oh, this is immediately sorting the information. How do I get less of this and more of that? That's perfectly human and normal, and that will never go away. Even the most enlightened people still have that. But the breath work is really all about accessing that space, accessing that gut feeling or that heart feeling that you don't have an explanation for yet is unmistakably there. And how do you access that, for lack of a better term, energy field and feel into it and let that feeling really open up to you so that you can attend and befriend it and, open up and not be so in this space where you experience something that feels unsafe or feels intense or feels painful to you, and you're not kind of living with that stuck in your body trying to rationalize it away. You're just kind of sitting with the raw energy of it. So the breath work really brings up very raw energy, and it can be very intense because you're kind of inviting that to come forth, but in inviting it to come forth, you're actually releasing it. So
Yeah.
at the end of the breath work, you're taking a breath and you're like, oh my God, I can think again. I can
Yeah.
have, I'm not, I don't have all these voices in my head pulling me apart, making me feel like I'm contradicting myself or feeling any way. Like I'm very clear. And of course, then life goes on and you have to do more breath work to kind of, it's not a one and done, but it is a tool that will kind of continually help you. I know I keep coming back to the word, but ground in the full reality of what's happening in your moment
Yeah.
in life, because so much of suffering is just kind of denying the full scope of existence, right?
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the most common human response to stress and hardship is
Yeah.
denial. Yeah. So if somebody out there listening says, "Oh, I kind of want to try this," is this something that they absolutely need to have a teacher of? Can this is this something they can access online?
Yeah.
What do you think is the safest and most accessible approach towards this?
I would say, it's I do, of course, have online resources and stuff, but it kind of depends on the person. Like, I would never want somebody who's come from like a high trauma background to go into breath work with like a Spotify track. Sometimes, depending on who you are, it's really helpful for at least the first one or two times to have a teacher present with you, just to help create a space and debrief with you after, and make sure you're feeling supported throughout. Because I've been in sessions with people where they're having a big epic release and reaction, and I actually go over to them and have them stop breathing and hold their hands and bring them back to just like rest now, like no more. And a Spotify track, whatever, would just keep going and going, and if you don't have the experience to know where you are, you might kind of push yourself too far. There are wonderful teachers like Allison Sinatra who are available to do this type of work. But I would recommend to anybody to do, first one or two or three sessions with somebody and then off to the races yourself. Sure.
What is your experience? My only experience with breath work was when we were in a group. What are your thoughts around kind of being one on one versus in a group? Because I would imagine it's a slightly potentially very different experience, or maybe not.
The first time I did it was in a group. And so I
Hmm.
think I should say that you did it with me at a group at a Mama Farm retreat that you hosted, our Art of Pausing retreat, which is all about perimenopause and menopause. And so that was a group, but it was like a really specific container, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Um, and I think that there was kind of intimacy and safety in that container, and that's really important. So for me too, like my first time doing breath work, I was at Mama Farm. I knew the place. I knew JJ. She's a lovely person. She introduced me to Allison. Any friend of JJ's is a friend of mine. So it's important to have these just building blocks of like, I am safe going into these things. And if you can't find a group to do it with, I think one-on-one sessions are incredibly powerful. I've
Yeah.
done both, and it can really help you to just get in there and cry and scream or laugh or go deeper, because there are other people making noises around you. And if you're distractible or feeling embarrassed about your own feelings in that moment, you can kind of, again, clamp down. So it depends on your personality and what feels good to you in the moment. And then sometimes you do it by yourself a few times and it opens you up into a community, and you have a community of people that you do that practice with. And it's like the trust tree. You're all like breathing together and understanding that things are going to get weird sometimes, and it's like all good. You're there for that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. So I want to remind everyone there are many, many different approaches towards meditation, breathing techniques, other ways of tapping into our kind of inner space, if you will. And It sometimes takes trial and experience saying, oh, no, that doesn't really do it for me. As Elettra shared with us, she did a lot of breathing techniques, and it wasn't until a certain time in her life where for whatever reason, it tapped into something very deep. And remember also, I talk a lot about these different approaches towards healing on Gynocurious that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to, people say, oh, if I can't do it every day, then I shouldn't do it. I don't even think the best yogis practice yoga every single day. That there is life that weaves through our practices, our searches, and that's okay too. Right?
Absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
called meditation practice, breathwork practice. You're practicing so that you can pull those things into your everyday real life, you know? I mean, the
Yeah.
most enlightened teachers would say all of life is sacred. So whether you're sitting in front of your meditation altar or cooking dinner for your kids or sitting at your computer, it's all sacred. So the meditation work is to kind of help you realize that all of that is the thing. There's no other thing. So I've just
Right.
put that out there.
Yeah, no, it's great. So that brings we're getting towards our close, and I just want to make sure we talk about the sacred space of Mama Farm because it's an amazing place that you and your mom and others have created, and I don't know why it felt just so special. One, it's beautiful. Yes, the landscaping is lovely. And there's this wonderful farm, literally vegetable farm and flower farm right next to the buildings. And there's animals everywhere. So for those of us like me who love animals of any sort, it's just enriched with just this wonderful power of Mother Nature. And my understanding, but please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the retreats that Mama Farm is beginning to really focus on are on health and particularly women's health. Is that true? And can you tell us about what retreats might be happening at Mama Farm?
Yes, absolutely. So I've been an entrepreneur. I've done a few different businesses. And the thing that I always kind of enjoy the most about businesses, as I'm enjoying with my children, is like at first you're just like trying to make sure that they're breathing and like you're just like it's a moment to moment. Are you going to be living? And then all of a sudden, just like children, the business kind of starts like walking and talking by itself. And you're just kind of like watching it teeter around. And then all of a sudden it like grows up and it like bringing friends home. And you're kind of interacting it with it in a weird way. So I would say Mama Farm is at that place where like we've done a lot of experimentation with the community. We've thrown out a plethora of all kinds of programming open to all abilities, all ages, men, women, everybody is welcome. And what really resonates is like Mama Farm wants to be a space and a place that focuses on wellness. And when I say
Mm,
wellness, I mean health, like physical health, but also like you were saying before, like mental health and physical health and how that like that intersection. Like how do we nourish ourselves so those two things are really supported? So it's been interesting to see that because again, we've created all kinds of programming and what comes back for the most part, not exclusively, for the most part, are women, young mothers, or all the way up to grandmothers looking for a space to kind of come talk about their health and their bodies and
mm.
their minds and create community and gain tools. And so I'm very honored that Mama Farm has decided to become this thing because it dovetails very nicely with my own interests. And we have, of course, the wonderful Art of Pausing retreat with you, Dr. Amy Novatt, and your colleagues, Dr. Laura McIsaac and Dr. Rachel Mash, coming up. And that Art of Pausing retreat is really one of our favorite retreats we do at Mama Farm. I mean, my mother is like obsessed with you guys. She asks about you
It's a
all the
mutual
time.
love affair.
And I'm like, Mom, they're my friends. Um, she loves you. So the Art of Pausing retreat was all about you and your colleagues connecting to women who are entering menopause and connecting with them in such a way where you're doctors, so you have the medical, you know, jefe behind you, but you were really relating to them as human beings. And I think that that was so, and friends. By the end of the weekend at Mama Farm, everybody retreat is like everybody's like hugging. You have a whole new group of friends. It's a very intimate space. So it was such a, I'm so honored that you guys are going to be coming back. That was a very powerful retreat. And because of your retreat and because of your Art of Pausing retreat model of kind of physicians connecting with community in that way. We also have now collaborated with the hospital out here. There's a new hospital in our neighborhood, and we're going to be doing knitting classes because we have sheep at Mama Farm for cancer patients with doctors and nurses who have survived cancer themselves. So again, it's this opportunity to connect with doctors and nurses and kind of ask them health questions, but you're relating to them as friends. And there's not so much kind of medical instruction, and which I think is very important, obviously, especially in that case, but there's also just kind of a heart relationship that can be very healing and soothing. So that's the purpose with those knitting circles, which will be happening in March and beyond. We also do our real reset retreat with two incredible women, Farah and Kiori, who basically are all around kind of reconfiguring and reapproaching your own approach to what you eat and how you exercise and your relationship to yourself as a young woman or an older woman. I had to go through the real reset after my second son basically sucked all the chi out of my body. And I really had to reassess from the ground. What can I eat? What makes me feel good? What serves me? What doesn't? Are these ways of exercising actually getting me the results of what I want? Why am I exercising at this point? So they really help people to recalibrate and meet themselves again in a new place in their lives. And then we also have all kinds of classes around just like cooking and workshops around farm to fashion, which is sheep to spool wool production. So people really understand these processes. We have a food distribution programming in partnership with Farmer Patty, who does all the vegetables and flowers. And we have school programs and tours and stuff like that. So there's a lot going on. And I invite people to, if they want it, we have a 4-bedroom bed and breakfast at the farm. So even if there's not a retreat going on, you can come join us, and you can find all of this information on our website, which is www.mamafarm.us. And you can find the B&B on there, and you can find ways to sign up for our CSA on there, which is the food distribution program, or you can find out about our ticketed events and retreats. It's all up there and updated all the time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I love the analogy to watching children grow. It's so true. And we get impatient, at different stages of parenting as well as our own businesses. So it reminded me that yeah, it's a practice in just, well, faith and trusting that it will evolve, or maybe not, but that's okay too. We learn from our failures as much as our wins. So
Yeah, things
good.
have their own life,
That's
and
right.
they want to
That's
be what
right.
they want to be. And my mother said to me before I had kids, it was a funny thing. She said, remember that you can do very little good and a lot of bad as a mother.
I have a friend who said, no matter what you do, you fuck it up.
Yeah. So to me, that just kind of means like I have to kind of live and let live, and I can kind of shape things at the margins maybe and make sure things are staying on the rails to a degree. And that's really the best that I can do. So the same goes for Mama Farm. It is what it wants to be, and it will continue to grow in the ways it wants to. And I can facilitate that and curate to a certain extent, but it's off to the races.
That's great. So when you're not parenting, when you're not programming at Mama Farm, when you have space for yourself, other than your practices that we've talked about, what do you do for pleasure?
That's so nice. What a nice question. I don't know if I'm getting older or if like my meditation practice has changed my point, my literal visual field, but like recently the thing that brings me so much joy and pleasure is like walking and looking at the leaves in my neighborhood. Leaves this fall, I'm looking outside right now. I mean, they are like golden bright yellow still. And I wonder if that's partially due to the drought that's been happening. But for my yard, it gets watered most days. So as far as my yard is concerned, it is so soothing to be outside for me. I think I get a lot of pleasure connecting with nature. And again, just like watching, we live right near the water, being near the water, feeling the breeze, listening to birds. It's such good medicine for me. And it's really all I need, So right after this podcast, I have about 45-minute break, and I'm going to go on a long walk and look at the leaves. I can't think of anything better to do with my time.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, may you have many long walks
Thank
in the
you.
autumn. Yeah. So thank you for joining me today, Elettra. I really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. Thank you. I'm
Yes.
very flattered to have been here. Thank you.
And thank you to those who are listening and to my co-producers, Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud. Until our next episode, please stay well. Listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored. And after today's show, please also take notice of your own breath. What is it telling you? What is it asking of you? Please listen.